To the surprise of nobody, the UFC booked the rematch between Sean O'Malley and champion Merab to headline UFC 316 June 7th in New Jersey. And this is another example of the UFC not giving the fight the fans want. And it also shows a lack of long-term planning. And I'll talk about all that in today's video. My name is James Lynch. So I think when it comes to booking rematches for a title fight, they usually look at the former champion having multiple title defenses, or they had a close and competitive first fight. Now, in the case of O'Malley, I'll give him credit. He did have one title defense. That was against Chito Vera. We'll talk a little bit more about that fight getting booked a little bit later. But the fight with Merab, the first one that they had, was not close. Now, I know there's this narrative going around that it was a close fight. You know, certainly a lot of O'Malley fans feel like he could have won that fight. But I honestly think if you ask most MMA fans, that was not a competitive fight. The stats back this up. There was at no point in that matchup, Merab was in danger of getting finished. There was at no point where you felt like he was going to lose a round decisively. I think Merab won that fight, no questions asked. So I don't think people are really interested in seeing the rematch because of the fact the first fight was so one-sided. Now, let's talk about that Chito Vera title defense. Chito Vera was not the number one contender at the time. The reason the UFC booked that fight was they were playing up the narrative that Chito handed Sean O'Malley his first career loss, and this was a chance for O'Malley to avenge that loss. But realistically, Chito Vera was not a number one contender at the time. There were a lot of other options, and one of the options that should have been on the table, and fans may disagree with me on this one, was Aljamain Sterling. Now, yes, Aljamain Sterling lost his title by getting knocked out by Sean O'Malley. However, he had multiple title defenses prior to that warranted him getting an automatic rematch. And if people think this is a crazy idea, Stipe Miocic, when he was heavyweight champion, got knocked out by Daniel Cormier. He was given an automatic rematch because the UFC recognized that he had multiple title defenses. Now, of course, I know the politics of the UFC. The UFC is not a fan of Aljamain Sterling. They are a big fan of Sean O'Malley. That's part of the reason why that wasn't even on the table. And Aljo himself admitted that the UFC never even offered that option to him after his fight. And I know people will also say that Sterling moved up to 145. However, I'm sure if he was given another title opportunity against Sean O'Malley, he would have taken it. Now, the fight that fans wanted for UFC 316 was Merab against Petr Yan. Now, yes, Petr Yan lost to Merab back in 2023, and that also was a fight that Merab clearly won. However, Petr Yan has had two really good wins since then over Song Yadong and Davison Figueiredo that were ranked opponents that certainly warranted him getting a rematch against Merab. For Sean O'Malley, there were a number of fights they could have made that didn't involve him having a rematch with the current champion. One of the ones I did a video on right when O'Malley lost his title was Jose Aldo. Now, I know people are going to get upset being like Aldo is ranked number 11th. It doesn't make any sense. But here's the thing. Aldo's still a pretty big name in the division. He's a former featherweight champion. It's also a fresh matchup, and in my opinion, a winnable fight for O'Malley. Now, the reason I suggest this is because the UFC obviously looks at O'Malley as being a good for business type of fighter for them. Would you not want to give O'Malley a bit of a bounce back fight against Aldo at this stage in his career so he could get back to title contention? I wouldn't have even minded that. I think that fight is a lot better and makes more sense than him actually fighting Merab in this situation. Instead, we're getting Jose Aldo fight Aiemann Zahabi at UFC 315. And listen, I'm a big Aiemann Zahabi fan. I think it's amazing the type of run that he's gone on, but I think most fans forget that Aiemann Zahabi is 37 years old. How is this good for business if Aiemann Zahabi defeats Jose Aldo? It's not like Aiemann Zahabi is going to go on any sort of title run. I think if you did Aldo and O'Malley, O'Malley's young enough where he could have got the bounce back fight potentially. And there's also a possibility O'Malley could have lost that, but at least he's fighting someone that has some name value. And that to me would have been a much better fight as opposed to trying to win over Aiemann Zahabi and giving him the win in Montreal. Let's say he does go out there and win. I don't know if he does. It's going to be a close fight, but I just think long term, it's better if O'Malley gets a win over Aldo than Aiemann Zahabi. So again, I think this comes into the idea that the UFC has a very lack of long-term planning when it comes to their fighters. Another fight that everyone wanted with Sean O'Malley was Corey Sandhagen. And of course, they booked Corey Sandhagen against Davison Figueiredo, and that's a fun fight. But just from an actual division perspective, you got Sandhagen and O'Malley who've been in the weight class for a long time. That's a fight that a lot of fans wanted to see. And you could make the argument that Sandhagen's coming off a loss in his last fight to Umar Nurmagomedov. Sean O'Malley's coming off a loss. It made a ton of sense. And that to me is a fight you make if you don't care about O'Malley for business, if you don't mind him losing another fight. I think fans would have more respect if Sean O'Malley had fought a guy like Corey Sandhagen Sandhagen after losing his title than him automatically getting the rematch, because everyone is saying the quiet part out loud, and that is the UFC is giving Sean O'Malley the shot because they think he's good for business. In any other scenario, if it's any other fighter, if this is Petr Yan, if this is Sandhagen or someone else, they're not giving him this opportunity for a rematch because they obviously think Sean O'Malley is better for business. And like I mentioned off the top, the UFC wants Sean O'Malley to win this fight. They want him to knock out Merab Dvalishvili, and they can deny it all they want, but it's better for business if Sean O'Malley is champion as opposed to Merab Dvalishvili. We know the UFC is not the biggest fan of Merab Dvalishvili. I don't think they rushed him to fight Umar, but it certainly wasn't a lot of time in between title fights from his, winning the title from Sean O'Malley to him fighting Umar. They don't exactly are doing any favors. The UFC is also probably still mad at Merab for not fighting Aljamain Sterling a number of years ago. So there's all these things that play into this. But to me, Sean O'Malley fighting Merab Dvalishvili is also very short-term thinking and not long-term planning, because what happens if Merab Dvalishvili defeats Sean O'Malley again? The UFC is going to hope that someone else wins the belt, but I don't know if that's a guarantee. Merab Dvalishvili looks very good in this weight class. I think the one fighter that has a chance of defeating Merab Dvalishvili down the line is Umar Nurmagomedov. Let's say that Merab doesn't lose the title for a long time. What do you do with O'Malley? You could get him to move up to 145, but the big fight that people were talking about at 145 is no longer an option. Ilia Topuria has moved up from the featherweight division to the lightweight division. That fight's not on the table anymore. So what type of big fights are there for O'Malley at 145? Volkanovski's getting up there in age. He might not even win next week against Diego Lopez. I think Diego Lopez would be a fun fight, but there aren't any big money fights at 145 for O'Malley either, if he had to move up due to the fact that he's already lost twice to the current champion. But this isn't anything new for the UFC in terms of short-term planning and not long-term thinking. Look no further than the title rematch at lightweight between Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 294. I bring up this example all the time. The UFC was so short-sighted that they put Volkanovski on like a week's notice to fight Islam. He ends up getting knocked out and really derailed his career from that point on. That fight, if they would have waited and done that rematch and built it up, it could have been one of the biggest rematches in UFC history in terms of the build-up, both guys having full camps. That was a very short-term move that did not pan out well, especially for Alexander Volkanovski and even for Islam, because when he won that fight, there's still fans out there saying, well, it's because of the short notice that Islam won that fight, which I don't agree with, by the way, but that's how fans look at it. And they had a backup fighter for that fight. It was Mateusz Gamrot. And that fight, yes, I don't think it would have been the most appealing fight in the world, but that would have been better in the short term than ruining the long-term rematch of Islam and Volkanovski. Ever since the ESPN deal has come in, the UFC has really done a lot of this short-term planning stuff, and I think this fight in particular with Merab and Sean O'Malley is the greatest example of this. Again, I think they're trying to get O'Malley over to become the champ again, but the risk is that Merab may never lose the title for quite some time, and you're really banking on the fact that he is, because otherwise Sean O'Malley's not going to be fighting for a title anytime soon if he loses 2 fights in a row. I think that's very short-term thinking from the UFC, and I think they're doing it, like I said, of O'Malley's puncher's chance of getting it done. And I should also mention, I know O'Malley had some injuries going into the first fight. Maybe that does change things, but it's just the fact it sets a bad precedent for booking title fights when you're literally giving someone the opportunity to sit out for a while and automatically get a title shot. And I know there's going to be O'Malley fans in the comments being like, what are you talking about, James? I love this fight. This is great. O'Malley deserves it. He got the win over Yan a couple years ago, even though I don't think he won that fight. Let's be honest here. But go look at the comments right now in the video I did yesterday. Most people are not happy about this fight. They don't like the fact that the UFC is doing what everyone can see they're doing. They're trying to get Sean O'Malley a win. So again, wanted to just talk about the fact that I think the UFC has a very bad habit of not doing long-term thinking and not giving the fights that the fans want. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me here? Do you want to see this fight? Should they have done Petr Yan and Merab instead? Who would you have wanted to see O'Malley fight if it wasn't for the title? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a discussion about this. But again, I think the UFC, they make some really good fights, but they also make some bad ones like we're going to be seeing here at UFC 316. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.